Imagine living in a house where unseen forces hurl objects across rooms, scratch you in your sleep, and whisper threats in the dead of night. From the violent Black Monk of Pontefract to the chilling South Shields poltergeist, these are the world's most terrifying, real-life poltergeist cases that defy all logic and reason. Are you brave enough to uncover the truth? Chapter 1: The Enfield Poltergeist. The Enfield poltergeist is one of the most well-documented and controversial poltergeist cases in history, captivating public attention with its eerie occurrences and extensive media coverage. This chapter delves into the strange events that took place in Enfield, a suburban town in North London, from 1977 to 1979, involving the Hodgson family and their small, ordinary council house that became the site of extraordinary disturbances. The story of the Enfield poltergeist is filled with dramatic phenomena, a plethora of eyewitness testimonies, and intense debates among skeptics and believers. The beginning of the haunting. The haunting began in August 1977 when Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4 children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy, called the police to her modest home on Green Street. She reported strange knocking sounds coming from the walls of her children's bedroom. At first, she thought the noises were caused by intruders or structural problems, but things quickly took a darker turn. Furniture started to move on its own, a chest of drawers slid across the floor without any apparent force, and beds shook violently as the children lay on them. The disturbances seemed to center around 11-year-old Janet Hodgson. The activity intensified rapidly, and the family began experiencing inexplicable phenomena, such as objects being thrown across rooms, toys floating in midair, and disembodied voices echoing through the house. Word of the unusual occurrences spread quickly, drawing the attention of local media and eventually paranormal investigators. Eyewitness accounts and investigation. The first police officers on the scene, WPC Carolyn Heaps and her colleague, became some of the earliest eyewitnesses to the bizarre phenomena. WPC Heaps later recounted seeing a chair move about 4 feet across the living room floor without any visible cause. Her statement, recorded in official police documents, added a layer of credibility to the family's claims and piqued the interest of paranormal researchers. 2 prominent investigators, Maurice Grosse and Guy Leon Playfair, from the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, took on the case. Grosse, who had recently suffered the tragic loss of his daughter, felt a personal connection to the Hodgson family's plight and was determined to uncover the truth behind the disturbances. Playfair, an experienced journalist and researcher, joined him, bringing a more skeptical and methodical approach to the investigation. Over the course of 18 months, Grosse and Playfair documented numerous incidents, including furniture overturning, objects levitating, and the unexplained cold breezes that swept through the house. One of the most chilling aspects was the voice phenomena. Janet, the primary focus of the activity, began speaking in a deep, gravelly voice, claiming to be Bill Wilkins, a man who had died in the house years earlier. Recordings of Janet's voice, which sounded far too mature for an 11-year-old girl, added to the mystery. Speech therapists and voice experts analyzed the recordings and concluded that it would be nearly impossible for Janet to sustain such a voice without damaging her vocal cords. Media frenzy and public reaction. As the news of the Enfield poltergeist spread, the Hodgson home became a media hotspot. Journalists, photographers, and television crews visited the house, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural activity. The Daily Mirror newspaper was among the first to cover the story extensively, and their sensational headlines contributed to the public's fascination and fear. Photographs of Janet seemingly being levitated from her bed were published, though skeptics pointed out that she could have been jumping rather than levitating. The involvement of the media brought both support and criticism to the Hodgson family. On one hand, it raised awareness of their plight and brought them a degree of sympathy. On the other hand, it also attracted accusations of fabrication and hoaxing. Some argued that the children were simply seeking attention, and that the media circus surrounding the house only encouraged them to continue the act. Despite the controversies, several independent witnesses, including neighbors, journalists, and investigators, reported seeing or experiencing inexplicable phenomena. Their testimonies provided corroborative evidence that something genuinely strange was happening at the Hodgson residence. Theories and skepticism. The Enfield poltergeist case has been the subject of intense debate among paranormal researchers, psychologists, and skeptics. Skeptics argue that the events were either a result of a hoax perpetrated by the Hodgson children or a case of psychological manipulation. They point to instances where Janet and her sister Margaret were caught bending spoons and faking incidents, which casts doubt on the authenticity of their claims. However, proponents of the paranormal explanation argue that the sheer volume of documented phenomena and the consistency of eyewitness testimonies cannot be easily dismissed. Maurice Grosse and Guy Leon Playfair remained convinced that the majority of the incidents they witnessed were genuine and could not be explained by rational means. They theorized that Janet, who was entering puberty at the time, might have been a conduit for the poltergeist activity due to her heightened emotional state, a common factor in many poltergeist cases. Psychologists have also weighed in, suggesting that the events could be a manifestation of repressed emotions and psychological stress. The Hodgson family, struggling with the absence of a father figure and financial hardship, may have unconsciously created or exaggerated the disturbances as a cry for help or as a means of coping with their difficult circumstances. The disturbances gradually subsided in 1979, although occasional phenomena reportedly continued to occur. Janet was eventually sent to a psychiatric unit for a short time, which seemed to coincide with a decrease in the activity. In later years, she admitted that some of the incidents were exaggerated, but maintained that the majority were genuine. "I knew when things were real and when they were not," she said in a later interview, underscoring the ambiguity that continues to surround the case. The Enfield poltergeist remains one of the most compelling and divisive cases in the history of paranormal research. For some, it stands as proof of the existence of unseen forces that can manipulate the physical world. For others, it is a cautionary tale about the power of suggestion, psychological projection, and the desire for attention. Whether one believes in poltergeists or not, the Enfield case challenges us to consider the limits of our understanding of reality and the mysteries that still lie beyond our comprehension. Chapter 2: The Bell Witch Haunting. The Bell Witch Haunting is one of America's most infamous and enduring poltergeist cases, and it has fascinated researchers and storytellers for over 2 centuries. The events, which reportedly took place between 1817 and 1821 in the small town of Adams, Tennessee, involved a series of bizarre and terrifying occurrences that plagued the Bell family on their rural farm. Unlike other poltergeist cases, the Bell Witch phenomena included not only physical disturbances, but also auditory hallucinations, direct physical assaults, and a voice that seemed to have its own personality and motives. The origins of the haunting. The haunting of the Bell family began in 1817, when John Bell, a farmer, and his family started experiencing strange and inexplicable phenomena at their home. It began with strange sounds, faint knocking noises at first, which soon escalated into more pronounced bangs on the walls and doors. The sounds were followed by even more disturbing events: disembodied voices, the sounds of chains being dragged across floors, and the noises of animals fighting and scratching. The activity soon grew more intense. The family members, especially John Bell and his daughter Betsy, began to experience physical attacks. Betsy would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, claiming that she had been slapped, pinched, or had her hair pulled by unseen hands. John Bell also suffered physical assaults, and his health started to deteriorate mysteriously. His tongue swelled up, and he experienced violent twitching and jerking in his face muscles. His symptoms only worsened over time, with no apparent medical explanation. The voice of the witch. As the disturbances continued, the entity allegedly responsible for the hauntings began to speak. At first, it was only a whisper, but soon it became a full-fledged voice. This voice, often referred to as Kate, claimed to be a spirit, and it exhibited a remarkable ability to carry on conversations, mimic people's voices, and even recite scripture. The spirit seemed to have a particular vendetta against John Bell and repeatedly expressed its intent to kill him. The Bell Witch also seemed to display a wide range of emotions and intelligence. It would sometimes engage in lengthy discussions with visitors, revealing knowledge of events happening far from the Bell farm. It even appeared to have a sense of humor, as it would often engage in pranks or trickery. However, this levity was short-lived, and the spirit's malicious side would quickly resurface, particularly towards John Bell and Betsy. Eyewitness accounts and community involvement. News of the disturbances at the Bell farm spread quickly throughout Robertson County and beyond. Neighbors and visitors flocked to the Bell property to witness the phenomena firsthand, and many claimed to have experienced the entity's presence themselves. One notable visitor was Andrew Jackson, who would later become the 7th President of the United States. According to local lore, Jackson was intrigued by the stories and decided to visit the Bell farm with a few of his men. However, upon arriving, Jackson reportedly experienced such unnerving events that he left, declaring that he would rather face the British Army than deal with the Bell Witch again. The Bell Witch also took on a role in the local community. It would visit neighbors' homes, eavesdrop on conversations, and then accurately report back what it had heard, often causing distrust and tension among families and friends. The witch's ability to relay information it seemingly could not know fueled speculation that it was omnipresent and omniscient. The death of John Bell. The haunting reached its climax in 1820, when John Bell's health deteriorated rapidly. His symptoms included swelling of the tongue and face, convulsions, and difficulty swallowing, and they became more severe with each passing day. On December 20, 1820, John Bell was found dead in his bed. Near his body was a small vial of an unidentified black liquid. When the Bell family asked the witch what the liquid was, the spirit gleefully replied that it was poison it had given to John Bell. John Bell's death was considered the culmination of the spirit's vendetta against him, and it became a chilling testament to the poltergeist's malevolent power. The local community was both horrified and fascinated by the apparent death of John Bell at the hands of a supernatural force. The entity even disrupted Bell's funeral, laughing and singing loudly during the proceedings. Following John Bell's death, the disturbances quieted down but did not completely cease. The spirit continued to target Betsy Bell, who had become engaged to a young man named Joshua Gardner. However, the entity made it clear that it disapproved of the match and harassed Betsy incessantly until she eventually broke off the engagement. Afterward, the poltergeist announced that it would leave but promised to return in 7 years. True to its word, the entity allegedly returned in 1828, briefly visiting John Bell Jr. and discussing a variety of topics before disappearing again. The Bell Witch legend has since become ingrained in American folklore, and it continues to be a popular subject for books, documentaries, and movies. The site of the Bell Farm has become a tourist attraction, with the nearby Bell Witch Cave being a focal point for visitors hoping to experience the paranormal. Theories and explanations. The Bell Witch case has generated a range of theories from believers and skeptics alike. Paranormal enthusiasts argue that the Bell Witch was a powerful poltergeist, or even a malevolent spirit with a personal grudge against John Bell and his family. They point to the consistency of eyewitness testimonies, the wide range of documented phenomena, and the entity's apparent intelligence and personality as evidence that the haunting was genuine. Others suggest that the case may have been an elaborate hoax or the result of mass hysteria. Some historians and psychologists propose that the phenomena could have been a manifestation of psychological trauma, with Betsy Bell being the possible focus. They speculate that her fear, stress, and possible abuse might have triggered episodes of unconscious psychokinesis, where the mind unknowingly influences physical objects. There is also speculation that the Bell Witch legend may have been embellished over time, turning it into a cautionary tale for the community. The Bell Witch haunting remains a complex and multifaceted case, blending folklore, history, and the unexplained. It serves as an enduring example of the fascination and fear that poltergeist phenomena can evoke. Chapter 3: The Rosenheim Poltergeist. The Rosenheim poltergeist case is one of the most thoroughly investigated and scientifically documented poltergeist incidents of the 20th century. Occurring in 1967 in the small town of Rosenheim in Bavaria, Germany, this case involved a series of strange disturbances in a law office that baffled investigators and skeptics alike. Unlike many other poltergeist cases that rely heavily on anecdotal evidence, the Rosenheim case attracted the attention of scientists, engineers, and police officers who witnessed and recorded the phenomena, providing a unique blend of empirical observation and unexplained events. The beginning of the phenomena. The disturbances began in the summer of 1967 at the law office of Sigmund Adam, a respected attorney in Rosenheim. Employees reported strange occurrences. Telephone lines would suddenly go dead or make inexplicable clicking noises, light fixtures would swing violently, and picture frames on the walls would rotate or fall to the ground without any apparent cause. Initially, Adams suspected that these disturbances were technical malfunctions or pranks by the staff. However, as the incidents increased in frequency and intensity, he realized that something more mysterious was at play. One of the most striking features of the Rosenheim phenomena was the erratic behavior of the office's telephone system. Phone calls were often cut off mid-conversation, the lines would ring without anyone dialing, and the office received numerous calls to and from numbers that were never dialed. The phone company, Deutsche Bundespost, investigated the problem but found no faults in the system. During the investigations, the phone lines were found to generate an unusually high number of pulse signals, often thousands within minutes, despite no one using the phones. The poltergeist activity intensifies. As the weeks went on, the strange activity in the office escalated. Light bulbs exploded, neon lights flickered on and off despite the switches being in the off position, and cabinets and filing drawers opened by themselves. Witnesses, including clients and delivery workers, reported seeing objects move without any visible force acting on them. A large steel filing cabinet weighing several hundred pounds was seen sliding across the floor, and heavy framed paintings were repeatedly torn from the walls. The focal point of these disturbances seemed to be a 19-year-old secretary named Anne-Marie Schaeberle. Many of the incidents occurred around her desk or when she was present in the room. Schaeberle herself reported feeling uneasy and sensed a strange presence in the office. Some colleagues also noticed that she exhibited signs of stress, which appeared to coincide with the increased intensity of the poltergeist activity. Scientific investigation, led by Dr. Hans Bender. The case drew the attention of Dr. Hans Bender, a well-known parapsychologist and professor at the University of Freiburg who specialized in the study of paranormal phenomena. Bender arrived in Rosenheim with a team of researchers and equipment to document and analyze the disturbances. His team installed cameras, voice recorders, and measuring devices to capture any unusual activity. Over several weeks, Bender and his team recorded numerous inexplicable events. Light fixtures were observed swinging as if an invisible force had pushed them, without any signs of tampering or drafts. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence involved the neon lights in the office. The lights flickered in a manner inconsistent with electrical problems. Instead of random flashes, they seemed to pulse rhythmically. Engineers from the electric utility company were called in to inspect the wiring and fuse boxes, but they found nothing wrong with the electrical system. Bender also noted that many of the phenomena occurred when Anne-Marie was present, leading him to hypothesize that she might be unknowingly causing the disturbances through a form of psychokinesis, a theory that suggests certain individuals can unconsciously move objects or affect their environment without physical contact. This theory was supported by Anne-Marie's psychological profile, which indicated high levels of stress and emotional turmoil. As word of the Rosenheim poltergeist spread, the media descended upon the small town. Journalists from German newspapers, television, and radio covered the story, turning it into a national sensation. The law office was inundated with curious visitors, reporters, and skeptics, eager to witness the events for themselves. Several journalists who visited the office also reported experiencing the phenomena, further fueling public interest. Despite the intense media attention, the local authorities remained skeptical. The police conducted their own investigation, suspecting that the events might have been staged by someone in the office, possibly Anne-Marie. However, they could find no evidence of trickery or fraud. The mystery deepened when engineers and technicians from the telephone company and electric utility, who had no interest in promoting paranormal explanations, reported witnessing unexplainable events firsthand. The Rosenheim case remains highly controversial, with skeptics proposing alternative explanations. Some suggested that Anne-Marie could have been unconsciously manipulating the environment to gain attention or sympathy, using simple tricks or sleight of hand. Others believe that the disturbances were caused by a combination of natural phenomena, such as underground vibrations or electrical faults, which might have led to a psychological suggestion among the office staff, creating a shared belief in a poltergeist. However, these explanations often fall short when accounting for the range and consistency of the phenomena witnessed by numerous independent observers. For example, the erratic telephone behavior and the unusual electrical readings were well documented by professionals who could not identify any mechanical or technical faults. The weight and size of some of the objects that moved also seemed beyond the capabilities of an average person to manipulate without detection. Aftermath and theories. By early 1968, the poltergeist activity in the law office gradually subsided after Anne-Marie left her job. This has led to theories that her presence was a crucial factor in the phenomena. Dr. Hans Bender remained convinced that the events in Rosenheim were genuine examples of poltergeist activity, possibly linked to Anne-Marie's emotional and psychological state. He published several papers on the case, using it to support his theories on psychokinesis and the unconscious mind's ability to affect the physical world. The case remains one of the most studied and debated in the field of parapsychology. It provides a rare instance where scientific instruments, professional engineers, and police officials all documented and corroborated the events, making it difficult to dismiss as mere imagination or deceit. The Rosenheim poltergeist case stands out as a unique and compelling example of poltergeist phenomena, blending scientific observation with the unexplained. It challenges both skeptics and believers to consider the limits of our understanding of reality and the potential for the human mind to influence the physical world in ways we do not yet fully comprehend. Chapter 4: The Borley Rectory Phenomena. Borley Rectory, often referred to as the most haunted house in England, remains one of the most intriguing and controversial poltergeist cases in history. Built in 1862 by Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull, the rectory was intended to house the rector of Borley Church and his family. However, over the decades, this seemingly ordinary residence became infamous for a series of unexplained phenomena, including poltergeist activity, apparitions, and strange noises. Unlike other poltergeist cases, Borley Rectory's hauntings spanned decades, involved multiple occupants, and attracted significant media attention and extensive investigation by paranormal researchers, particularly Harry Price. The origins of the haunting. The first reports of paranormal activity at Borley Rectory began shortly after it was built. Local legend claimed that the site was cursed due to a tragic romance between a nun from a nearby convent and a monk from Borley. According to the story, the nun and monk attempted to elope but were caught, the monk was executed, and the nun was bricked up alive within the convent walls. While the historical accuracy of this story is debated, it set the stage for what would become one of the most talked about hauntings in England. Early occupants of the rectory, including Reverend Bull and his family, reported seeing a ghostly nun walking the grounds, a headless coachman driving a phantom carriage, and hearing unexplained footsteps in the hallways. Although these reports were unsettling, the Bull family, who lived there for several decades, seemed to accept the phenomena as part of life at Borley Rectory. The intensification of poltergeist activity. After the death of Reverend Bull in 1892 and his son Harry Bull in 1927, the rectory was taken over by Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife, Mabel. Almost immediately, the new occupants began experiencing intense and disturbing poltergeist activity. One of the most notorious incidents involved Mabel discovering a human skull wrapped in brown paper in one of the cupboards. After this discovery, the activity escalated. Bells would ring on their own, windows would shatter without any apparent cause, and small stones and other objects were thrown across rooms by unseen forces. The poltergeist activity at Borley rectory also included disturbing messages that appeared on the walls. These messages seemed to be directed specifically at Mabel Smith and other occupants, pleading for help or prayers. Words such as "Marianne, please help get," and "light mass prayers" appeared on the walls, seemingly written in a childlike scrawl. Attempts to wash away the writings were futile, as they would often reappear within days. The family was so distressed that they contacted the Daily Mirror newspaper, which subsequently published an article that brought the rectory to national attention. Harry Price and his investigations. Following the media coverage, the renowned paranormal investigator Harry Price became involved in the Borley rectory case. In 1929, Price visited the rectory with a team of researchers and began a series of investigations that would span nearly a decade. Price claimed to have witnessed numerous poltergeist phenomena during his visits, including stones being thrown, objects moving on their own, and mysterious knocks and raps that seemed to respond intelligently to questions. Price also conducted experiments to capture evidence of the supernatural activity. He set up cameras, recording devices, and other equipment in an attempt to document the phenomena. On one occasion, he claimed to have seen a brick levitate and fly across a room, and on another, he reported witnessing a séance where a spirit purportedly communicated through tapping sounds. In 1937, after the rectory was vacated, Price leased the building for a year to conduct a more thorough investigation. He recruited volunteers, whom he called official observers, to stay at the rectory and record any unusual events. Their reports documented numerous instances of poltergeist activity, including the movement of objects, sudden temperature drops, and more mysterious writings on the walls. Despite the extensive documentation of paranormal activity at Borley rectory, many skeptics have criticized Price's investigations, accusing him of fraud, exaggeration, or misinterpretation of events. Some argue that the writings on the walls could have been fabricated by Price or his volunteers to enhance the story's sensationalism. Others suggested that the poltergeist activity was a result of psychological suggestion and hysteria among the rectory's occupants, rather than genuine paranormal phenomena. One of the most significant criticisms came from two members of the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, Eric Dingwall and K.M. Goldney, who published a detailed report in 1956 after Price's death, questioning the credibility of his findings. They argued that Price may have exaggerated or even fabricated some of the evidence to boost his reputation as a paranormal investigator. Their report pointed to inconsistencies in the witness testimonies, the lack of physical evidence, and the possibility that many of the phenomena could be explained by natural causes or human intervention. However, not all researchers dismissed the case outright. Some maintained that while Price might have sensationalized certain aspects of the haunting, there were still too many credible witness accounts to ignore. For example, multiple independent witnesses, including members of the local community, reported seeing apparitions or experiencing poltergeist-like disturbances. The destruction of the rectory. In 1939, Borley rectory was destroyed by a fire. The blaze broke out in the middle of the night, and while the cause was officially deemed accidental, many believed it was somehow connected to the haunting. Harry Price conducted one final investigation among the ruins and claimed to have found evidence of bones and other artifacts that might have belonged to the legendary nun whose spirit supposedly haunted the grounds. Even after its destruction, Borley rectory's legend continued to grow. People still reported strange occurrences on the site, including ghostly figures appearing near the ruins, inexplicable lights, and eerie sounds. The site became a point of interest for paranormal enthusiasts, historians, and skeptics alike, each hoping to uncover the truth behind the tales. The Borley rectory case remains one of the most debated poltergeist phenomena in history, with numerous theories attempting to explain the events. Proponents of the paranormal believe that the hauntings were genuine and that the rectory was a hotspot for poltergeist activity, possibly due to its tragic history or the presence of restless spirits like the nun. Borley rectory remains an enigmatic chapter in the history of poltergeist phenomena. The case highlights the complexities involved in studying the paranormal, where the lines between fact and fiction, belief and skepticism, can become blurred. It serves as a reminder that even in cases with extensive documentation and numerous eyewitness accounts, the truth can be elusive. Chapter 5: The Black Monk of Pontefract. The haunting at 30 East Drive in Pontefract, England, is one of the most violent and terrifying poltergeist cases ever recorded. Dubbed the Black Monk of Pontefract, this case involves a series of intense paranormal events that plagued the Pritchard family during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Unlike many poltergeist cases that center around mere knocking sounds or small objects moving, the Pontefract haunting involved physical attacks, violent disturbances, and terrifying apparitions, making it one of the most compelling and frightening examples of poltergeist phenomena. The beginnings of the haunting. The story began in August 1966 when Joe and Jean Pritchard moved into a modest semi-detached house at 30 East Drive, along with their teenage son Philip and their younger daughter Diane. Almost immediately after moving in, the family began to experience strange occurrences. At first, these were relatively minor. Lights flickered, a fine white powder would appear on the floor without explanation, and objects would disappear only to reappear in strange places. However, the disturbances quickly escalated. The family began hearing loud bangs and thuds throughout the house, and heavy furniture was found overturned. The kettle turned on and off by itself, and green foam would seep from the taps. The most disturbing occurrences involved cold gusts of wind that swept through the house, even when all windows were closed. These phenomena seemed to defy all rational explanations, and left the Pritchard family feeling unsettled. The appearance of the Black Monk. The activity reached a new level of terror when the family began seeing a shadowy figure they would come to call the Black Monk. Described as a tall, hooded figure dressed in black robes, the apparition was often seen lurking in dark corners or at the top of the staircase. It was said to have a malevolent presence, and its appearances were always accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature and a feeling of intense dread. The Black Monk did not just limit its activities to appearing and disappearing. It began to physically attack members of the Pritchard family, particularly focusing on Diane, the youngest daughter. She was thrown from her bed, pulled up the stairs by an invisible force, and on one occasion dragged across the room by her hair. Witnesses, including family members and neighbors, reported seeing her being slapped, scratched, and even strangled by an unseen entity. Theories about the Black Monk. Local folklore and history provided a potential explanation for the identity of the Black Monk. Pontefract was home to a priory in the Middle Ages, and legend has it that a 16th-century monk was executed for the rape and murder of a young girl. The site of 30 East Drive is believed by some to be near the location where this monk met his gruesome end. Paranormal investigators speculate that the violent poltergeist activity might be the result of this spirit seeking revenge or attempting to assert dominance over the living. While the historical evidence for the existence of this monk remains unclear, the connection between the house and the gruesome tale provided a chilling narrative that seemed to match the intensity of the haunting. Theories emerged that the monk's spirit, unable to find peace, manifested as a poltergeist with an aggressive and vengeful nature, especially targeting young women like Diane. The paranormal investigations. The Pritchard family reached out to local priests, spiritualists, and paranormal investigators to help them understand and potentially rid their home of the Black Monk. The house became a hub for paranormal activity enthusiasts, some of whom witnessed the disturbances firsthand. Researchers documented various incidents, including flying objects, sudden temperature drops, and the appearance of the monk-like figure. One of the most famous investigators to visit the home was Tom Cuniff, a local historian and paranormal researcher. Cuniff reported experiencing violent poltergeist activity during his visits, including stones being thrown at him by unseen hands and doors slamming shut with great force. Attempts to communicate with the spirit through seances and Ouija boards were met with limited success, often resulting in even more intense activity, including violent shaking of the table and threatening messages. Several paranormal investigators suggested that the poltergeist could be a manifestation of pent-up psychological or emotional energy within the family, particularly around the teenage daughter, Diane. This is a common theory in poltergeist cases, where the activity is thought to stem from the unconscious mind of a disturbed individual. However, the Pritchards were adamant that the events were beyond anything psychological, pointing to the physical evidence and multiple eyewitness accounts. Despite the media scrutiny and the numerous investigations, the poltergeist activity at 30 East Drive continued unabated. Items would fly across rooms, religious symbols were defaced or destroyed, and photographs would be inexplicably damaged. Even the skeptical members of the community began to take the haunting more seriously, as more witnesses came forward with their own accounts of strange experiences at the house. The Pritchard family eventually sought a priest to perform an exorcism. However, the exorcism seemed to provoke the entity further, resulting in even more violent phenomena. The family was left with no choice but to coexist with the poltergeist, which would wax and wane in activity over the years. The haunting at 30 East Drive, Pontefract, remains one of the most terrifying poltergeist cases in the world. To this day, the house is frequently visited by paranormal enthusiasts, researchers, and those curious about the Black Monk legend. Many visitors claim to have experienced strange occurrences, from sudden chills to being touched by unseen hands, perpetuating the legend of the Black Monk. In recent years, the house has become a popular destination for ghost hunters and has been featured in numerous paranormal television shows, books, and documentaries. The story of the Black Monk of Pontefract has become a staple in the world of ghost stories and continues to fascinate and terrify those who seek to understand the unknown. The Black Monk case, like many poltergeist phenomena, is rife with debates and theories. Some believe the Black Monk was indeed a malevolent spirit, a remnant of a violent past reaching out to torment the living. Others suggest the poltergeist activity was a form of psychokinesis stemming from the emotional turmoil within the Pritchard household, particularly around Diane. Skeptics argue that the events could have been the result of pranks, exaggerations, or a form of mass hysteria. Regardless of the theories, the sheer intensity and violent nature of the Pontefract haunting set it apart from other poltergeist cases. The story of the Black Monk of Pontefract challenges us to confront the darker aspects of poltergeist phenomena, where the boundaries between the psychological, the supernatural, and the unknown are blurred. Chapter 6: The South Shields Poltergeist. The South Shields poltergeist case stands out as one of the most intense poltergeist cases of the 21st century. Taking place in a quiet suburban home in South Shields, England, in 2006, this modern haunting involved a young couple and their toddler son, who were subjected to violent poltergeist activity that seemed to border on the malevolent. Unlike many older cases where documentation was limited, this haunting was investigated by experienced paranormal researchers who gathered extensive evidence, including photographs, recordings, and eyewitness testimonies. The South Shields poltergeist remains a chilling reminder that such phenomena are not confined to the distant past. The beginning of the haunting. The terrifying ordeal began in the summer of 2006 when Mark and Marianne, a young couple living with their 3-year-old son Robert, started experiencing strange disturbances in their South Shields home. What began as typical poltergeist activity, objects disappearing and reappearing in strange places, sudden cold spots, and unexplained noises, soon escalated into something far more menacing. One night, Mark and Marianne were awoken by loud bangs coming from Robert's room. Upon rushing to check on their son, they found his toys scattered across the floor in a perfect line, and his bed had been overturned. From this point forward, the poltergeist activity became more frequent and aggressive. Toys, especially those belonging to their son, seemed to be at the center of the activity. Teddy bears, dolls, and action figures would appear in various places throughout the house, often arranged in eerie poses, such as a stuffed bear with a knife in its paw pointed toward the bed. The couple also discovered sinister messages scrawled on a whiteboard or scribbled on paper, threatening harm to the family. Messages like "You're dead" were found, heightening the sense of danger in the house. Physical attacks and disturbing phenomena. The poltergeist activity soon turned violent. Mark, Marianne, and even their young son were not spared from physical assaults. Mark reported being pinned down in bed by an unseen force, unable to move or speak. He described feeling as though invisible hands were wrapped around his throat, choking him. Marianne also suffered from scratches and bruises that appeared on her body overnight. The couple documented these injuries with photographs, providing chilling visual evidence of the attacks. One of the most terrifying episodes occurred when Marianne was attacked in her sleep. She awoke to find herself being dragged out of bed by her ankles, screaming in terror as Mark tried desperately to pull her back. On another occasion, they found their son Robert's toy rabbits suspended in midair, seemingly floating of their own accord. The poltergeist even seemed to have a morbid sense of humor, once placing a rocking horse on the staircase with a noose around its neck, sending a clear and terrifying message to the family. The entity's ability to manipulate the physical environment in such a malicious way suggested that this was no ordinary haunting. The poltergeist seemed to have a unique intelligence and awareness, targeting the family members' fears and pushing them to the brink of psychological breakdown. The paranormal investigation. As the situation became more unbearable, Mark and Marianne contacted Darren Ritson and Michael J. Hallowell, experienced paranormal investigators from the northeast of England who had a reputation for thorough and credible research. Ritson and Hallowell visited the house several times, witnessing many of the strange occurrences firsthand. They recorded audio and video evidence, capturing disembodied voices, unexplained noises, and even some of the physical manifestations of the poltergeist's presence. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence gathered by the investigators was a photograph of a chair moving across a room of its own accord. The chair appeared to have been pulled by an invisible force, with no one in the vicinity at the time. Other photographs showed objects flying through the air or positioned in precarious and impossible arrangements. The investigators also documented numerous instances of the poltergeist speaking through disembodied voices, which could be heard taunting the family or making threatening remarks. Ritson and Hallowell published their findings in a book titled The South Shields Poltergeist, One Family's Fight Against an Invisible Intruder, detailing their investigations and the numerous phenomena they observed. Their research added a level of credibility to the haunting, as they were respected figures in the paranormal community, known for their rigorous approach and avoidance of sensationalism. Theories and explanations. As with any poltergeist case, the South Shields poltergeist has been the subject of numerous theories attempting to explain the phenomena. Skeptics argue that the haunting could have been the result of a carefully orchestrated hoax by the family, either for attention or financial gain. They suggest that the physical evidence, such as the photographs of moving objects or threatening messages, could have been staged. However, proponents of the paranormal explanation point to the consistency of the phenomena, the corroborating eyewitness testimonies, and the extensive documentation as evidence that something genuinely unexplainable occurred in the house. The fact that multiple people, including the investigators, witnessed some of the events firsthand adds weight to the argument that this was a legitimate poltergeist case. One theory suggests that the activity could be a manifestation of psychokinesis, where the unconscious mind of one or more family members is projecting their psychological stress into the environment, causing objects to move or noises to occur. However, this theory does not fully explain the malicious intelligence exhibited by the entity or its ability to physically attack multiple people. Another theory is that the poltergeist could have been an entity or spirit that was attached to the family or the house itself. The violence and malicious nature of the activity suggest a more malevolent spirit, possibly one that had suffered trauma or sought revenge. However, There is no historical record of any significant tragedy or death on the property that could explain the entity's presence. The haunting continues. Despite efforts by the investigators and spiritual practitioners to cleanse the house and rid it of the entity, the poltergeist activity persisted for several months. Over time, the intensity of the disturbances began to decrease, and the attacks became less frequent. However, the family remained on edge, constantly fearing a resurgence of the violent activity. Eventually, the activity subsided enough that Mark, Marianne, and Robert were able to move on with their lives, though they remained deeply affected by their experiences. Even after the haunting ended, the story of the South Shields poltergeist continues to intrigue and terrify those who study the paranormal. The case serves as a stark reminder that poltergeist phenomena are not just relics of the past. They can and do occur in modern times, affecting ordinary families in unimaginable ways. Chapter 7. Theories behind poltergeist phenomena. Poltergeist phenomena, characterized by unexplained physical disturbances like objects moving, strange noises, and violent attacks, continue to baffle both skeptics and believers. Despite centuries of reported cases from all over the world, a definitive explanation for poltergeist activity remains elusive. This chapter explores the various theories that have been proposed to explain these mysterious occurrences, examining perspectives from psychology, parapsychology, and science. Psychological perspectives. One of the most widely accepted theories among psychologists is that poltergeist activity is a manifestation of repressed emotions, particularly those associated with stress, trauma, or psychological disturbance. This theory often involves a concept known as recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, RSPK, where an individual, usually an adolescent, undergoing significant emotional turmoil, unconsciously releases built-up psychic energy, causing objects to move or strange noises to occur. The Enfield poltergeist, with its focus on young Janet Hodgson, and the Rosenheim poltergeist, centered around the teenage secretary Anne-Marie Chabrol, are examples where this theory is often applied. However, skeptics argue that this explanation lacks empirical evidence and relies heavily on anecdotal observations. Paranormal theories. For those who believe in the paranormal, poltergeist phenomena are often explained as the actions of restless spirits or malevolent entities. In cases like the Bell Witch haunting or the Black Monk of Pontefract, the disturbances are thought to be caused by spirits with a vendetta or unfinished business, manifesting in violent or disturbing ways. Paranormal investigators suggest that these entities might be attracted to certain locations due to traumatic events in the past, or could be attached to specific individuals, as seen in the South Shields poltergeist. However, the lack of physical evidence to prove the existence of spirits or ghosts leaves these explanations in the realm of belief rather than scientific fact. Poltergeist phenomena remain a gray area where science, psychology, and the supernatural intersect. While psychological and environmental theories offer rational explanations for some cases, the more extreme and well-documented incidents challenge our understanding of reality. Whether one views these occurrences as evidence of the paranormal, psychological projections, or yet to be understood natural forces, the enduring mystery of poltergeists serves as a reminder of the complexities of human perception and the unknown forces that may exist in our world. Thank you for listening. Have you experienced anything that absolutely terrified you? Let us know.